right. So, uh, we always talk about leadership and, how to really get the most out of your team.
Mm,
And you sent over some notes on a book called 100 Ways to Motivate Others. And honestly, I got to say, this book, it's like a gold mine of practical advice. Really got me thinking differently about leading with impact.
that's a good one.
Yeah. And, I think we can pull out some real gems today,
Yeah.
some really actionable stuff to help, unlock even more potential in your team.
Absolutely. What I think is so refreshing about this book, 100 Ways to Motivate Others by Steve Chandler and Scott Richardson, is how they just ditch all those tired leadership cliches, you know?
Oh, yeah,
It
yeah.
gets right to the core.
Stuff that's been done to death.
Yeah. And like what actually makes people tick.
It really does.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest takeaways for me, and I wrote this down, was like almost this shift in perspective. It's like, stop questioning your team's motivation
Mm.
and start asking yourself, like, okay, what am I doing to equip them to succeed?
Right. Because it's like that old saying, you can lead a horse to water,
That's
right?
exactly.
But you can't like force them to drink. And it's the same with motivation. You can't force someone to be motivated, but
Yeah.
you can create an environment where that motivation, it can flourish, right?
It can thrive.
It can thrive.
Yes, and a big part of that, and they talk about this in the book, is shifting your perspective as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
I love how they compare self-discipline, this idea of self-discipline,
Right.
to learning a new language. Like
Yeah.
let's say you get transferred to Juarez, Mexico. You don't speak any Spanish. Are you going to just throw your hands up and say, well, I'm not a Spanish speaker?
Right. You're going to find a way.
No, you're
Yeah.
going to find a way to communicate.
You're going to use a dictionary.
You're going to use the tools available.
Exactly.
And that's the same approach we need to take with motivation,
100%.
both for ourselves and for our teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
So instead of getting stuck in this cycle of, are they motivated enough? Why aren't they motivated? It's like, okay, what tools am I giving them?
Right.
What am I doing to set them up for success?
Yeah. And sometimes the best tool that you can give as a leader is silence.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Like really emphasize listening before you jump in
That's a good one.
with all the answers and the solutions.
Because it's so easy to do that.
Oh, it is.
You want to jump in, you're ready
Oh, for sure.
to fix it.
So it's really about understanding their perspective, taking that time to listen. What are the challenges that they're facing and their thought processes?
Yeah. And instead of assuming you know what they need,
Mm-hmm.
it's asking what's going on,
Yeah.
what's working, what's not working.
Mm.
What would help you feel more successful in this role?
Right. Because we make a lot of assumptions as leaders. We do, and that's not always the right.
It's natural
Yeah.
to want to do that, but
It is. It is. But we have to catch ourselves
yeah.
and really take that step back.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yes, I love that. And speaking of, like ag, did you ever notice how like people can be dragging their feet at work,
Oh, yeah,
but then you get them into like a pickup basketball game or something,
totally.
and it's like a switch flips.
It's like a whole
Like-
different.
Yeah, and they've got all this energy.
Where'd that come from?
Where'd it come from?
Right.
Right? And it's because games, they tap into something, right?
Yeah, they're fun.
They're fun. There's a purpose.
They're engaging.
They're engaging. There are clear goals.
There's immediate feedback, usually, if you're playing a game.
Right. And so the book talks about this idea of like turning work into a game.
Okay, I like this.
Right. Like how can we take those same mechanics,
Gamification. Yeah.
gamification, there you go,
Yeah.
and apply them to the workplace?
So how do we do that?
So there's a lot of different ways you can introduce like scorekeeping or leaderboards or even friendly competitions, right?
Oh, I like that.
You can set mini challenges with rewards or even just public recognition.
Yeah, I love that. A little bit of healthy competition.
Exactly.
Never hurts anybody.
Right. And it really just tacks into that inherent desire that we all have for engagement and honestly, like a little bit of fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that, too, is connecting those tasks, even those mundane tasks, to the bigger why.
Yes.
Right. Because if someone feels like what they're doing is actually contributing to something meaningful,
Right.
it's going to be a lot more motivating than just checking boxes off a list.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, for example, instead of telling someone like, hey, we need you to make more sales calls,
Right.
you discuss with them like what achieving their sales target would actually mean for them personally.
Right.
Like what doors would that open? What would it feel like to hit that milestone? How would their life change?
Paint that picture
Paint that picture.
of success.
Yes, success. Exactly.
I love that. Now, another idea from the book that I really resonated with was this focus on strengths instead of weaknesses.
Yes. Yes.
which we all have, by the way.
We do. We all do.
It's so easy to get caught up in like, oh, I'm not good at this,
Mhm.
or, oh, they're not good at that. But it's like, why are we wasting energy on that
Right, right.
when you can leverage people's existing talents, right,
Absolutely.
to achieve those exceptional results?
Yes, work with what you've got,
Yeah.
right?
Why are we trying to fit a square peg into a round hole?
It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
No, it really doesn't. And they actually give a really good example in the book. They talk about a salesperson who's amazing at building rapport, but really struggles with the detailed research side of things,
Okay.
right? So instead of trying to force this person to become a research whiz,
Right.
you leverage that natural ability to connect with people, right?
Yeah.
And you let that drive their sales.
Play to their strengths.
Play to their strengths, exactly.
Yes, I love that. It's about setting your team up to win, right?
Yes, exactly.
By playing to those strengths.
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into the next concept, which is this idea of showing instead of telling,
Oh, yes.
right? It's one thing to talk about good customer service, for example, but it's completely different to demonstrate it.
Lead by example.
Lead by example, exactly.
Show them how it's done.
Right, because actions, they speak so much louder than words, especially when you're trying to motivate a team.
Oh, for sure.
And then this next one, it might seem a little counterintuitive, but it's this idea of giving up on always being right.
Oh, I like this one.
Right. Like sometimes giving up that need to be right can actually unlock so much potential in your team.
So it's like being open to learning from anyone,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Even if they have less experience than you.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard that saying, the student becomes the master?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's the person who struggled the most with something who can actually offer the most insightful solutions.
Because they had to break it down. They had to
Right. They had to really dissect it.
understand it on a different level.
Exactly. So instead of shutting down a new idea from, a junior team member, you take the time to really hear them out.
That's a good point.
You might be surprised by what you learn.
Yeah, because sometimes those fresh perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
they could really shake things up in a good way.
They can, exactly.
And that all ties back to, I think, fostering that culture of open communication
Yeah.
and mutual respect.
That's the key. And then when you combine that with honoring even your smallest commitments,
Yes.
that's when trust starts to flourish, and trust fuels motivation.
Because if I feel like my leader or my manager, whoever it is constantly letting me down,
Right.
even in small ways,
Yeah.
it's going to be really hard for me to be motivated to go above and beyond for them.
Right. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Right. Exactly.
But when you're meticulous about honoring those small promises, showing up on time, delivering on those little favors.
Yeah, the little things.
The little things. That's how you build credibility and show your team that they can rely on you.
It's that foundation of trust that makes everything else possible, right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about a few things here. We talked about shifting your perspective as a leader,
Yes.
equipping your team with the tools to succeed,
Mm-hmm.
leading by example, giving up that need to always be right,
Yeah.
honoring those commitments, building that trust. Now, one thing that I thought was really interesting, they talk about this idea of managing agreements, not people.
Yes.
And what do they mean by that? It's about shifting away from this kind of like parent-child dynamic.
Right.
I can sometimes creep into the workplace.
It can, and it's not, it's not productive. It's not helpful.
No, not helpful for anyone.
And instead, creating this more collaborative, empowering environment.
Right. So it's about creating really clear agreements.
Right.
You sit down with your team member and you say, okay, here's what we need to achieve. Do you agree to do this by this date?
Okay.
And it's about fostering that sense of ownership and accountability.
So it's not about micromanaging.
No.
It's about setting those clear expectations.
Exactly.
And then empowering them to
And then letting them run with it.
run with it.
But then, of course, if those agreements aren't met, it's not about punishment, right?
Right.
It's about having an open conversation, understanding what got in the way, and then, figuring out how to move forward together.
Because sometimes things happen, right?
Right. They do.
Life happens, things come up.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to, as a leader, go immediately to that place of, well, you didn't do what you said you were going to do.
Right. But that's not helpful.
But if you approach from a place of understanding and collaboration,
Mm.
it can actually strengthen the relationship
100%.
and lead to even better results in the long run.
Right. It's all about the long game.
It is about the long game.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because this book really emphasizes that human element of leadership,
Yes.
which is so important and so easy to forget, right?
It is. It is. And I actually love how they talk about treating customers like friends,
Yes.
right? Like, it sounds so simple, but think about how different our interactions would be if we treated every customer
Right. Yeah. Imagine.
like they were a close friend.
Like, how would you treat a customer if they were a dear friend? You would go above and beyond, right?
Of course.
You'd be more forgiving.
Well, understand.
Yeah, you'd be more invested in their success, right?
Absolutely. And that's the energy that we want to bring to
Right.
all of our customer interactions.
I love that. So much to think about there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another really powerful concept from the book that I wanted to touch on is the importance of leading with your mind, not just your emotions.
Oh, I like this one. Tell me more.
Okay, so they use this analogy of focusing a camera,
Okay.
right? And it's about this intentional shift in focus.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking to a team member,
Yeah.
it's like you're slowly turning that internal dial
Right.
until they come into sharp, clear focus.
I like that. So you're really present in that moment,
You are fully present.
giving them your undivided attention.
Yes, and they can feel that.
They can feel it. That makes them feel heard, valued, respected.
Yes.
Which is so important.
It's like, think about a time when you're talking to someone
Yeah.
and you could tell they were not really listening.
The worst.
It's the worst.
Checking their phone, looking over your shoulder.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. Or just like that glazed over look.
Yes, that's the worst.
It is so demotivating.
It is.
Right. But when you feel truly heard and seen by someone, especially your leader,
Yeah.
it is so motivating.
It's huge, and it builds that connection, and again, that trust, which we've already talked about.
Right. It all comes back to that foundation.
It does. It all comes back to that trust.
Now, another way to really boost motivation
Yeah.
is to celebrate those small wins along the way.
Yeah, right. Because those little victories, they add up.
They do. They create momentum.
They do. They create momentum, and they keep everyone moving forward.
Yeah. So even if it's just a quick, hey, I saw your numbers for last week. They're amazing. Great job.
Yes.
It goes a long way.
It does.
Yeah.
It shows that you're paying attention.
You're paying attention. You're acknowledging their effort.
And not just the effort,
Right. The results.
but the results, right?
Yeah.
Because focusing on results, not just activity,
Yes.
that's a key theme throughout this entire book.
It is. It's about shifting from process management to outcome management.
Exactly.
Right. So it's not just about, okay, how many sales calls did you make? It's like, okay, but how many deals did you close?
Exactly. And how much revenue did that generate? Right. So it's about aligning those individual efforts
With the bigger picture.
with the bigger picture. Exactly.
I love that. Aligning those individual efforts with the bigger picture goals of the organization.
And it's amazing how motivating that can be
It is.
for people, right? And when they feel like their work is actually contributing to something meaningful, it gives them a sense of purpose.
Yes.
And it drives them to achieve those results.
There's that saying, people support what they help to create.
That's it. That's it.
And when you can tap into that,
Yes,
that's when the magic happens, right?
exactly.
It does.
Now, speaking of creating a truly motivating environment, this is where it gets really interesting.
It really does feel like so much of what we've been talking about comes back to like almost the mindset shift
Yeah.
as a leader.
Right.
It's about seeing those challenges as opportunities and then creating an environment where your team feels like really empowered
Yes.
to do their best work.
It's about challenging those old paradigms, right? And recognizing that leadership, it's less about, wielding authority and more about how can you foster growth,
Yeah.
both for yourself and your team.
Yeah, and part of that growth comes from being okay with not having all the answers. Like we were talking about earlier, giving up being right.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the solution, it's not going to come from you,
Right. It's about embracing those moments when you don't know
Right.
and creating that space for your team.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Nelson Mandela quote. It always seems impossible. Something like that until it's done.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. So it's like we can get so caught up in our own heads thinking that we have to have it all figured out.
Right.
But often the best solutions come from those unexpected places
Yes.
when we create that space for them to emerge.
Absolutely. And it leads beautifully into the next point from the book, which is about leading with humility.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So Chandler and Richardson, they argue that the most effective leaders, they don't pretend to have all the answers.
Right.
They're not afraid to say, I don't know, but let's figure this out together.
Yes.
Right.
It creates that shared purpose. It makes
We're
everyone feel like we're all in this together.
all in together.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just you up on high, dictating.
Right, because when you create that culture of, not being afraid to admit what you don't know, That's when you create this culture of continuous learning and growth.
Yes, and that's so important, especially in today's rapidly changing world, right?
Oh my gosh,
Like we have
yes.
to be constantly
So
learning,
constantly.
adapting, growing. Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, so we're talking about leading with humility, being
Yes.
open to those different perspectives. And then this one I thought was really interesting. They talk about this idea of managing superiors.
Managing up.
Managing up, yeah. You
Yes.
heard of this concept?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good
Because
way.
it's easy to forget that even people at the top, right? They
Uh,
have their own
yeah.
pressures, their own limitations.
Their own bosses. Yeah, their own bosses, exactly.
Exactly.
And so it's easy to get frustrated or to blame, lack of clarity from above.
Oh, for sure.
But the book encourages us to take ownership of those situations.
Yes.
Right. So it's about being proactive, seeking out those clear agreements, and then, communicating your needs effectively.
So instead of waiting for direction,
Yes.
you might say something like, hey, I need your input on this project by Tuesday so I can make sure we hit our deadline.
Is that doable?
Is that doable?
Right. And you're not being demanding.
You're not being
You're
demanding.
just communicating what you need
Exactly.
to be successful.
And working collaboratively to find solutions
Yeah.
instead of placing blame.
I love that.
Right.
It's like leading from below,
Yes.
right? It's like,
Ah.
I don't have to have the title.
Mm-hmm.
To be a leader,
Right.
I can inspire and influence
Absolutely.
from wherever I am.
You can. It's so true.
And that's really empowering, I think, for people to hear.
It is. It's very empowering.
It's like you don't have to wait
Mm-hmm.
for someone to give you permission to lead.
You don't. Exactly. You can step into that role.
You have that power within you.
You do.
I love that. And I think as we kind of, we're getting towards the end of our deep dive here,
Okay.
I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
this idea that leadership, it's a journey, not a destination.
It is.
Right. We're all learning as we go.
100%.
There's going to be challenges, there's going to be setbacks,
Obstacles.
but it's how we respond to those things
That is it. Yeah.
that really defines us as leaders.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes the best thing you can do as a leader
Yeah.
is to breathe,
Yes.
right? Take a step back.
Sometimes you just got to,
Just breathe.
right. Because we can get so caught up
Uh,
in the day-to-day,
the hustle and bustle.
the doing,
Yes.
that we forget to just be,
And be present.
yes,
Right.
be present with our teams, be present with ourselves.
Yes. And bring your whole self to the table, right?
Yeah,
Your
yeah.
passion, your creativity, your sense of humor.
Yes, because when you're enjoying what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
it's contagious,
It is. It's contagious.
right? People feel that,
They do.
and they're more likely to want to follow your lead.
And it just creates that positive energy
Yeah.
that ripples outward
It does.
and inspires everyone around you.
This has been such a great conversation.
Yes.
I feel like we've covered so much ground.
we have.
And this book, 100 Ways to Motivate Others,
Yeah.
it's got so much practical advice.
It does.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me
Yeah.
is that it's not about some magical formula or some
Oh.
secret sauce.
It's not.
It's about these small,
It really is the small things.
these small but consistent
Ex-
actions
yeah.
that we can take.
Mindset shifts.
Mindset shifts,
It's-
exactly.
Yes.
That can make a world of difference.
They can. They absolutely can. And, I think one of the most important things
Yeah,
is that it starts with you as a leader, right?
it does.
Like, you have to embody these principles if
Yeah.
you want to see them reflected in your team.
Lead by example. Yeah, it's amazing how these little shifts in thinking can really, create these ripple effects.
Right. Like, it's not always about these big sweeping changes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest impact.
It's true. It's true. So as we kind of wrap up here, anything else from 100 Ways to Motivate Others that you wanted to make sure we touch on?
I think one thing that's really important for leaders to remember is that, it's a journey, right? It's not like you read this book and then you've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
It's something that you have to constantly work at.
Right. Like any skill.
Exactly. And there are going to be days when you nail it.
Oh, yeah.
And you feel like, yes, I am a motivational rock star.
We all have those days, right? Where it just clicks.
Yes, exactly. But then there are going to be those days when you're like, what am I even doing? This is so hard.
It's like, why did I sign up for this?
Right, exactly. And I think it's important to give yourself grace on those days, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone, even the best leaders, they have those moments of doubt.
It's normal.
It is normal. So it's about, learning from those experiences, not letting them derail you.
It's like, what can I learn from this so I can show up even
Yeah.
better tomorrow?
Yes, 100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it's about remembering why you got into this in the first place, right?
Yes.
Because leadership, it's not just about, the bottom line or hitting those targets.
Hmm.
It's about making a difference.
Right. It's about inspiring others. It's about creating something bigger than yourself.
Yes, and when you can tap into that passion, that purpose,
Hmm.
that's what's going to really fuel your motivation.
Exactly. It's contagious, right? When you're excited about what you're doing, it's going to rub off on your team.
Oh, absolutely. People feel
Yeah, dear.
that energy, that
Well,
enthusiasm.
and that's what makes people want to follow you, right? Not because they have to, but because they want to.
Yes, exactly, because they believe in what you're doing.
Yes.
They believe in the vision.
And they believe in you as a leader.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to, dive into 100 ways to motivate others with me. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have. There's so much good stuff in there.
There's so much good stuff. So for our listener, if you're looking for, practical, actionable advice on how to motivate others, definitely check out the book.
Yes, highly recommend it.
You will not be disappointed.
Ah.
All right. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with impact. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.